What's the biggest mistake you've watched someone make in their personal life? One of my best friends walked out on his wife and 2 kids because a girl at the gym and him were having a relationship. As it actually turned out, she was just being friendly and chatting to him. No relationship, no mutual decision to be together, nothing. He misunderstood polite friendliness for flirting, and destroyed his own family for it. Must be my disabled brother who fell for an internet scam. He met a woman online, she lived in a different continent, but he was certain she was the love of his life. Spent over a year chatting and emailing her, and helping her with money from time to time. Very fishy stuff, but he refused to listen to my skepticism. It ended when he had saved up enough money to go visit her. He went, came back 2 days later and refused to ever admit what had happened. Went to his grave without ever talking about it. Second place goes to my father, who cheered him on. He wasn't sure whether it was a scam or not, but he thought it was nice that my brother had hopes and dreams. My sister owned a home with her husband and first child. Her father-in-law convinced them that if they sold their house and became live-in caretakers for some old relative of his, that he would leave his supposedly nice house in Austin to them. They'd get to live rent-free at this house, it would be theirs outright when he dies, and they'd be set. So they sell their house, move to Austin where they don't have jobs, and move in with this guy. And it's absolute chaos. Guy is constantly watching porn on the living room TV with their toddler around, doing inappropriate old guy stuff, telling them what they can and cannot do in the house and when they can come and go. It's a freaking nightmare. They end up leaving the house, and getting their own place. They also eventually moved to another state for a few years and came back. They've never been able to buy another house since housing prices have gone way up, and they didn't have enough equity on their other house that they sold, so they've been bouncing from shitty apartment to shitty apartment ever since. My friend chose to have a child with a man who had cheated on her multiple times, while still in high school. One of my students was offered a 95% scholarship to the famous music school Juilliard. They turned it down because they felt a 95% scholarship was a slap to the face, and instead decided not to go to school. Last I heard, they weren't playing, and were working minimum wage, but talking about how good they used to be. Single mother of 3 living in poverty. Gave her parents her $6,000 tax refund to hold onto because she didn't want her abusive ex to convince her to split it with him. Parents spent it all in weeks. My parents getting remarried, to different partners, when they have yet to figure their own shit out. They still haven't settled on custody of my younger siblings after going on 7 years now, and my father's wife just moved out. A guy in his mid-50s always worked under the table. Never filed a tax return. Didn't understand that he wouldn't qualify for Social Security. When I showed him the requirements on the government website, I thought he was going to cry. A buddy that lived with me for a while got a car he couldn't afford because he was obsessed with image. Stopped making payments, tried to part out the car and report as stolen since he had the bright idea that would bring more money than just giving it back to the bank. Then got into check fraud, which landed him in jail. Been in and out of the system ever since, from stories I hear. Reminded me of something similar without the fraud. My buddy had a decent car. His car got hit while parked outside. Insurance was going to give him a big payout. Got a rental car in the meantime. Parked it in the same place. Rental car gets hit and totaled. Didn't bother to get accident protection/insurance on the rental. Now he owes a lot of money. He drives for delivery, so he needs a car. Gets his insurance check back for original car. Can't work until he has a new car. Buys a new car with most of the money. Can't pay rent because the whole time he couldn't work. Should have bought a cheaper car. Now is in major debt, possibly going to be evicted and or under legal pressure from the city for other bills, only just started working again. But hey, at least he has a shiny used BMW. Friend worked hard to gain the credentials to advance his career to his goals. It took 4 months for him to get busted having an affair with a subordinate, and he lost all he worked for and ended up losing his license. My uncle got himself a mistress. Lent her $10,000 he never got back and lost his job defending her at work. Wife served him divorce papers short afterwards. He gave up his house to his wife. So he ended up jobless and homeless, sleeping on our couch at the ripe age of 60. Going drunk on a floatable boat in the middle of the lake when you don't know how to swim, poor guy drowned. Edit, inflatable. It was my now brother-in-law's younger brother. I luckily wasn't there that trip. I just heard what happened. I can't imagine the trauma my bro-in-law has now. I'm actually glad I wasn't there because that would have fucked me up good. They had to pull out his body themselves. Let go of a girl close to their wedding because of his idea of what a wife should be like. Lives in deep regret now as she married his friend and they're really happy whilst he has never found anyone else. His girl who rented out my parents' basement was not great at making smart life choices. She married someone who is serving life in prison for murder. She met him through her cousin who was also in prison. She eventually got a huge chest tattoo of his last name, and more tattoos of his name all over her body. He ended up being transferred to the east coast of Canada, she lived in the west coast, and she up and abandoned her 2 kids to be close to her husband. One of her kids is severely handicapped, but she never gave a shit about being a parent to her. Anyways, about 3 months after moving she posts all over her socials that they broke up, and she quickly tried getting the chest tattoo covered up. 2 weeks later she announced they worked it out and they were together again. They kept doing this pattern of fight, break up, make up and repeat. Again. She had 2 daughters she up and abandoned for a man who will most likely never get out of prison. My brother ran for public office without having an agenda. He had no leadership qualifications, background in position, or support from anyone in the community. His took out a $10,000 personal loan to finance his political run and held one fundraiser where most of the attendees were family and couldn't vote for him. He lost badly, coming in last behind 4 other candidates. It took him years to pay back the loan and refill his savings, which he completely drained to pay for signage and flyers. Saddest of all, the printer misspelled his name on both items, so any remnant is a harsh reminder of how badly things went. My brother was getting scouted by northeastern colleges to play football after playing remarkably well in high school. He dropped out of high school 6 months before he graduated. Have kids under the hope they'll fix their marriage. Children are not accessories. My friend failed psych evals to join the army. Once he got around that exception he was kicked out within a year. He robbed the corner store less than a mile from his house. He was in full SWAT gear with a tactical mask. Everyone knew exactly who it was. There were 8 calls to Crime Stoppers identifying him. He was arrested within 3 hours of the crime with the still loaded pistol in his car. If he had used a fake gun, or an unloaded pistol he would have gotten 1/2 or 1/4 the prison sentence. He went from being in the army to prison in less than a month. Dump all of their savings, $30,000 or so, into random crypto at the height of the market. They were trying to get more money to put towards a house but lost a majority of it when things crashed. When their significant other found out they left. Have another kid. After number 13. My high school philosophy teacher cheated on his wife with my classmate. His daughter was in the year below us. She transferred schools out of embarrassment when her dad finally left the family to pursue a relationship with the 18-year-old. Yuck. Waste their entire inheritance on drugs. One girl I know inherited just under $100,000, her grandmother passed away. This girl has serious mental health issues and is a druggie, blew all the money on drugs within 3 months. A friend of mine got roughly $200,000 after his mother died. He spent it not only on drugs but a lot of other bullshit. Fancy clothes which quite frankly looked ridiculous, like alligator skin sneakers, nice hotels for the weekend, etc. It was gone in about 6 months. Being passive and just letting everything happen to him. He wasn't sure if he wanted kids or not, but his girlfriend did, so they had sex without condoms. She got pregnant, with twins. He looks absolutely miserable. Similar things happened to him involving housing. His family convinced him to put the parents' mortgage in his name. Things got messy. Don't just let things happen to you. There is a couple my husband and I used to know before we had kids. They were decent people and we hung out for a period of time, but then fell out of touch. I guess in the past decade they got hooked on heroin, had 2 kids, had those kids taken away by the CPS and now one of them is in prison. It really went to shit for them and there is really no one else to blame. Bad choices. Just watched my cousin move out for the 5th time with no plan, nowhere to go, hanging out with manipulative people because they want her disability check. Cussed grandmother out when she tried to help and figure out what's going on, got kicked out of one of the hardest community center to get placed in, so now she definitely doesn't have a home and has been sleeping in one of the most dangerous parks in town because drug addicts go there at night. Gonna try to talk to her tonight, but honestly I don't know what the fuck I'm supposed to do. This has been continuous for months. Watched a friend make 1.2 million euros from a crypto coin of a €2,000 investment and holding it all the way down to 50,000 euros over a month time while rage gambling the last 50k on a casino. He did however buy a baller gaming computer from it during the GPU crisis, so he still ended up in profit from this trade, although he is now severely gambling addict and lost another 50k trying to get it back this year. When my grandmother died, my grandfather has about $15,000 left over to live off of until he could no longer afford his house. My cousin heard that grandpa had money, so he would ask grandpa for gas money all the time, then go and blow it on drugs. Over the course of 1 year, he convinced grandpa to give him 12,000 of the 15,000 that grandpa had left. Once grandpa realized what was going on, he stopped giving my cousin money, and because he could no longer pay his dealers, he got beat half to death and then dumped on the side of the road. If someone hadn't found him in time, he might not be here anymore. Probably not the biggest I've ever seen, but a pretty bad one I've just watched a colleague make. Met and started a relationship with a woman a few weeks ago. She has several kids with different guys. She told him that she had been sterilized. People have been warning him for a while that she has a lot of men dropping by and that she still hasn't entirely ended things with her exes. Now, as much as I get along with this guy, he's not the brightest bulb in the box. A few weeks back she dropped the bombshell on him that she's pregnant again. She told me that she found out she was pregnant 3 weeks ago. We've only been together for 2, does that mean I'm the dad? He's since burned bridges with work, said he'd handed his notice in, when in reality he went without handing in his notice. Left the low-rent place he was living in to move in with her. Anytime anyone tries to call him, she's the one to answer and talk for him. She was 14. He was 37. Having 3 children when they couldn't handle one. I watched a wasted guy throw 2k on a single roulette number, lose it, withdraw 5k more, and put it on the same number and lose it and then stare at the table. All while on a cruise ship. Then I went and had an old-fashioned and it was wonderful. Watching them become less themselves because of the person they are with. My friend decided she wanted to move out on her own, because living at her mom's house when she was nearly 30 was for losers. However, this girl had 2 kids under 5 and had just broken up with the father and said he was abusive. She worked a slightly above minimum wage job. She managed to find an apartment where rent alone would be 80% of her take-home pay. Somehow they approved her to rent it. No amount of shouting down the telephone how stupid that would be convinced her it was a bad idea. So she moves in. But struggles to find anyone to watch her kids, driving against traffic to drop them off at her mom's. She has bills to pay, and quickly realizes she is underwater every single month. So she then asks abusive psycho-jealous baby daddy to move back in. During this time she also decided that she would start sleeping with her married boss. When I asked her why not just find a random on Tinder, she said it was full of weirdos and creeps, as though her married boss wasn't. I've never known anyone else who has turned their life into such a dumpster fire. Having a third kid, when you can barely afford the first two in order to save the marriage. A close family member who has the attitude of I'm an adult now, I can do whatever I want. He's barely an adult and wrecked his car twice, recently been in jail, getting kicked out of his app in the next few days if he doesn't comply with rules, can't keep a relationship for more than a week. It's sad that he can't see how much his attitude/choices affects his life. My friend and I were hanging around one day. And he was talking about how his wife wanted to have a kid and if he didn't they should break up. He explained that he didn't want to and wasn't sure he loved her anymore. She was already controlling, stuff like making him FaceTime so prove who he was with. Me and my other friend told him he should just call it quits and not have the kid. He did anyway because of low self-worth and because he didn't want to shake up his life. Big surprise, it got worse and worse. For a while. Then about a year ago he finally got the gumption to try and divorce her. Of course it was met with more hostility. Long story short, he killed himself. I think back to the conversation we had all the time wishing I could have convinced him it was a bad idea. But I know that's wishful thinking. Watched my sister make a few, but the biggest one was going out drinking after a bad breakup. She just could not let the guy go. He was separated when they were together, but ultimately got back together with his wife. She got hammered and called me to pick her up. I had taken nighttime cold medicine, which knocks me the hell out, so obviously I couldn't drive to pick her up. She said that was fine, she would Uber. She lied, drove drunk to her ex's house, got into a physical altercation with her ex's wife, and left before the cops showed up. Then drove the wrong way down a one-way street and hit a concrete road block head-on. That night, she got a DUI, a restraining order, and a year of doctor's appointments to help fix the hip, leg and pelvic bones she broke, as well as the severe concussion she had. All because a guy she dated for 2 months broke up with her. Drugs. My friend's ex-husband had everything. A beautiful home on water, 3 beautiful kids and a very beautiful wife, a savings account with money in it. He was always a partier. But when things got bad, they got horrible. He abused his wife and children. They got divorced. They all lost everything. All because he tried meth. My friend got pregnant at 16. She convinced the father to have a second child with her because she wanted the kids to be close in age. So she has 2 kids by the time she turns 18. Then just after her 18th birthday, she announces out of nowhere that she's married to a completely different man. She dumped the baby daddy and eloped with a long-term friend. After 2 months of marriage, they announce that they are getting divorced. Why? Because she's pregnant and he doesn't want kids. Now she's a single mom with 3 kids under the age of 4. The real kicker of the story for me is that the boys from baby daddy number 1 are named Joseph and Henry, which it turns out are baby daddy number 2's first and middle name. A buddy of mine, at the time, in the Navy met a girl who was vacationing in his hometown while he was home on leave. They banged for 3 days without getting to know each other. They talked for 2 to 3 months while she was sleeping with her ex. She up and left her parents' house with all of her stuff including her handgun without telling a soul. Her parents freaked out and called the cops who found her at a motel halfway to the base we were stationed at. Being an adult, they just checked up on her. My buddy married her the next weekend because she needed insurance as she had been off her antidepressants for a week or so. They were both drunk as hell when they got married. The best man/witness asked if my buddy wanted to go through with it and even offered to make it all just go away if he wasn't ready. At the reception, the bride got up to use the bathroom and my buddy drunkenly admitted that he fucked up. I don't remember what lasted longer after that, his career in the Navy or the marriage, as he got kicked out for stealing photos off of someone's phone. A next-door neighbor owned a cabinet-making business. An employee introduced him to crack. Within a year he let the business gradually fail, left his wife for her twin sister, was investigated by the IRS who found child porn on his business computers. He went away for a long time. My buddy met a girl in college, who had a boyfriend. They got together. He ended up dropping out, got a random job. They decided to get married. From what I know, he had one friend at the wedding, who was not me. Moved across the state away from his family. After like a year I met up with him for some drinks. Within 3 weeks he told me he thought his marriage was over, pretty sure she cheated on him. Moved back home, took his life a year later. Family friend quit their government job after 23 years, 2 years before qualifying for a pension. They did it just because they wanted a change. They withdrew their pension contributions and bought an investment property at the absolute worst time. Now they are jobless and struggling to keep up with the overhead. Everyone advised against it and they still did it. A bunch of us normal potheads in our 20s and 3 of the 4 of us decided to smoke black tar heroin. It didn't seem interesting to me as I loved pot and I'm not a grass is greener guy. That day was the first day and one decision to ruining all of their lives. It started a spiral that day that wiped out all of their respective futures. That moment has been burned in my memory for almost 20 years now. Good friend messed around with a young Brazilian woman whose ulterior motive was to get married to stay in US. She got pregnant. He wouldn't marry her even after baby born, so she moved back to Brazil. He is now in his 50s raising a toddler that speaks Portuguese. Friend retired with a full pension 15 years ago. At the time he kept bragging about how he was starting a business with some random guy he knew. He legit said, he's the idea guy. I have the savings and the good credit score. Took out a huge loan, bought a bunch of expensive equipment. Shocker, business folded within 6 months, partner vanished with all the equipment. And now this guy, who should be enjoying his golden years, will be working retail until he drops. I heard my college roommate's one-night stand tell him he didn't need a condom because she was clean, and it was the safe part of her cycle. I didn't know the guy or like him all that well, and he regularly brought girls to our dorm room and fucked them while they thought I was sleeping. Now he's a single dad with herpes. Ruined his life. He had to drop out, get a job, and then watched her become a methany after their kid was born until social services got a custody change. I don't know what changed him exactly, but he started calling himself an alpha male, and questioning any activity, clothing choice, type of car, career path, drink, etc. as alpha or not. He bulked up and got large muscles but also still carries a beer gut. He tries to have his shirt off whenever possible, but it doesn't work for his body type. The constant seeking for assurances that something is alpha or not got tiring, or being told something someone was doing is beta behavior when I didn't have any interest or care made me stop hanging out. Of course, he now calls me a beta for not being alpha enough to hang out with him. My best friend have just left his wife with 2 children, been together for 18 years, for my now ex-girlfriend. I have tried to warn him about the fact she cheated on her previous boyfriend with another guy and myself, and she seduced him, a married man, and cheated on me with him. She lied to everyone including my best friend to hide things from him. She manipulates, she plays the victim and rejects every mistake she made on others. I know she told him her truth, yet he still repeats that the last year was hard on her and he will not blame her for past mistakes. She was telling me less than 2 months ago that my best friend was a manipulative, harassing, narcissist. I guess he will be in great troubles when she will finally leave him after cheating while saying anything to play victim. Biggest mistakes he will make. But, let's pray they will stay in love forever and live happily ever after.